Thank you, Shripriya. Thank you, Shripriya. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining us. As Shripriya has mentioned, today we have a very important session. So we'll be starting with the symptoms, and the most important symptom or the most common symptom that we deal with in palliative care is pain. And today we have with us Dr. Rita. Dr. Rita is working in the cancer center in Patna, and she's basically a radiation oncologist, but practicing palliative care, and she's involved in teaching with us. Mm. Dr. Rita, welcome you for the session, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this program. We have around nearly 70 plus participants, doctors from various parts of the country, and one doctor from Malaysia. And today is the second session. They have just heard about introduction to palliative care, and this would be their introduction to the whole pain modules. Thank you once again for agreeing to be a part of this program.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. Yeah, good evening, Dr. Sri Devi, and thank you for inviting me for taking this important session. So, without much delay, should I start the session? Am I audible? First of all, am I audible clearly?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. So, I'll just share my screen, right? Uh, is it visible? Hello, is it visible? Right.
Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am.
No, it is still showing started screen sharing.
Okay.
Now it
Just
is
let me know.
Now it is showing, but not in presentation mode.
Hello. Yeah. Should we start? Or
Yes, ma'am, we can start. Your presentation is not in the presentation mode. We can start. We are ready to.
okay, that I'll do. Fine. Now you can see, right? So, a very good evening to all of you. And we have assembled here for a very important session. I'll be talking on pain. It is a very
Rita, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Hello.
Sripriya this side. I think we are having some bandwidth problems, so we would recommend you to switch off your video and continue, ma'am. That wise, it would be better, I believe.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Am I better audible? Shripriya?
Yes, ma'am. In case something comes up,
Okay.
I will definitely interrupt.
Yeah. Okay, sure. Thank you. So, what is pain? We will be understanding that. And why do we need to understand pain? As MBBS doctors, all of us have learned to write painkillers. But still, why it is very important to understand what pain is, and if we understand what pain is and how we will manage it, how can we help our patients in palliative care? So for the today's session, our learning objective will be defining and describing pain, the pathophysiology of pain, classification of pain, and assessment of acute and chronic pain. So whenever I start my lecture, I generally ask the first participants, can you identify this person? Who is this person? By his appearance, one can very well clearly make out that he is a policeman, and he looks to be very confident. And just see what he has written. See, he had committed a suicide. And what has he written in the suicide note? Being a super cop, he was an IPS officer of Maharashtra cadre, a very brave person. He has written that I am ending my life as I am unable to deal with it. And this is what Mumbai police reveals details of Himanshi Roy's suicide note. So an educated, brave person, policeman, of great importance. And when he is suffering cancer, he is not able to bear his pain and he committed suicide. So, see the gap, how much there is gap to understand or assess anybody's pain and then to deal with it. It is very, very important to understand what is pain. When a policeman can suicide because of the cancer pain, think of other normal people or the illiterate patients who come to our OPD. So, pain management is basically a very critical component of palliative care, but it is often inadequately treated and it remains a global public health problem. And this is mainly because of the attitude of the people towards pain, inadequacy in the basic medical education and in management of chronic pain, and the misconception of using painkillers that it may have many side effects. Instead of focusing on controlling the pain of the patient, we focus on the side effects of the painkillers. Anyways, things apart, we have to understand what is pain, how to deal with it. And talking about our country, where more than 1 million cancer cases are diagnosed every year, and of which 60 to 80% of patients are diagnosed in advanced stages, and they have multiple types of pain. 70 to 80% of these patients experience pain, and pain impacts life, and life impacts pain. It is very important to understand. Uh, and it is very pathetic to know that only less than 3% have access to the adequate pain relief. So, what is pain? The simplest and the best line which I often remember, which is by Robert Roycross, and it is simple to remember. Pain is what the patient says hurts. That means whatever is disturbing him in any form, that is what is pain is. Pain is what the patient says hurts. So, going by the International Association for the Study of Pain, the definition, as per the definition, it is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential damage or described in terms of such damage. So, pain is a complex physical and emotional experience, and it is not at all a simple sensation. So, how do we understand pain in a much simpler way? What is pain? It is an unpleasant bodily sensation, first and foremost thing, and it is associated with an experienced threat, and it can also negatively impact life, a negative emotion based on this experienced threat. So, this is what we understand by pain. So, pain is, supposing we see this young man, he's just a 25-year-old boy, he is married, he is having 2 kids, and he has been diagnosed of squamous cell carcinoma of right upper lobe of lung in such a young age. So he has deep-seated gnawing pain over the right upper chest. He's irritable, he's sad, he's anxious, and he's unable to sleep. So all these are factors, multiple factors for causing pain for this young guy who is father of 2 kids. So pain is just not physical. It is a mix of bio, psycho, and social factors which influences the pain of the patient. So what are the factors? Being young person, he is having spiritual pain. He is father of 2 kids. He is wondering why did it happen to me? What sin he has committed in his life? He has social responsibilities to take care. Having 2 kids, having the diagnosis of cancer in itself is a big stress, emotional trauma to a patient that, okay, I'm suffering from cancer, because most of the time and most of the people relate cancer with a death sentence. The biological factor being he is having a mass in the right lobe of lung, he is having cancer, and he is being stressed, he is emotionally disturbed, he is irritable, sad, anxious, and he is unable to sleep. This is just tip of an iceberg. This kind of patient we see every day in our OPD. So what I was talking about this boy. Through this boy's history, I just wanted to show that pain is not only physical, it is a mixed component of physical, psychological, social, and spiritual. And the whole thing is called total pain. And this term was coined by Dame Ripley Saunders, who had been the pioneer in setting up the hospice movement in UK. So total pain is physical, psychosocial, spiritual. Now talk of pain, total pain. What are the physical factors? Physical factors for this patient's pain? It could be because he has been diagnosed of the cancer. It is because of the lump he is having in his body. It could be because of the treatment, pain of treatment, having taken chemotherapy, taking radiation, undergoing surgery. All this can cause pain. Multiple comorbid conditions like diabetes and hypertension. All these could be cause for a physical pain. Similarly, if we talk of the social pain, there can be many reasons like loss of role uh, and the social status, worries about the family and finances, loss of income, being dependent, loss of being dependent on other family members, worries about the future and family. Similarly, having spiritual pain, like why did it happen to me? What's the purpose of me being in this life? Is God angry with me? And multiple psychological factors like anxiety, depression, and fear of suffering. All this could be the reason for psychological part of the pain. So once we have understood what is pain, we must understand the pathophysiology and pathways of the pain before we start understanding, assessing, and describing what pain is all about. So pathophysiology is very important to understand how to what doses, what drugs which we can write. So in case we have to understand there are two fibers, A delta and C fibers, which are the pain carrying neurons, which are responsible for carrying pain in the body. And all the pain is processed in our brain, nowhere else, only it's processed in our pain. So what happens? So it has got three relays. One is the peripheral nerve, A delta and C fibers, which is having synapse with the neurons of the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. And from here, the neurons are carried through the spino-reticular tract up to the thalamus. And from thalamus, this forms the second relay. And from thalamus to cortex, this forms the third relay. So pain is caused by stimulation of the free nerve endings, as I told. A delta and C type nerves carry sensation of the pain. They are carried along the peripheral nerve to the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. That is what I was telling. That is the first relay of the pain. And synapses with the cells of spinothalamic tract, which cross and carry impulses up to the spinal cord through brainstem to thalamus. That is the second relay. And from thalamus to the other parts of the brain. That is the third relay. So talking about the types of sensitization, how a central nervous system is sensitized whenever there is sensation of pain. There are two ways of sensitization. That is, one is the peripheral sensitization and the other one is the central sensitization. So how it is caused? Pain is caused by the stimulation of the free nerve endings. So the sensation begins over here, the free nerve endings. This can be either due to the tissue injury, as in the case of trauma or cancer, which is causing stimulation of free nerve endings in the skin and connective tissues like bone tissue or soft tissue, or these nociceptors or receptors can be present in the viscera, and they result in the release of pain producing substances like bradykinin, serotonin, histamine, and substance P. So whenever the free nerve endings are stimulated, so there are certain substances like histamine, bradykinin, prostaglandins which are released. So if we give some medicine which can inhibit this pathway, can help in reducing the pain. And this is the basis giving NSAIDs and COX inhibitors which block formation of prostaglandins. So it results in the relief of pain. This is about the first relay. Coming to the central sensitization or talking about the central relay. brain level and the spinal cord level. So what happens once the pain sensation is carried in the dorsal horn of spinal cord? There are pain is transmitted to spinothalamic tract. But at the same time, because of the long-standing continuous pain, the adjacent neurons which are called as sleepy neurons, which remain dormant in most of the time, they also get sensitized, and that causes increased pain sensation. And this is the basis of giving opioids, which acts as the opioid receptors in the spinal cord and brain. And there can be a still further stimulation leading to activation of NMDA receptors, which sensitize the dorsal horn cells to the glutamate and the neurotransmitters, which increase and perpetuate the pain. And this is the basis of giving ketamine for refractory pain. So another mechanism by which pain occurs, and that is called as recruitment. What is recruitment? When there is persistent pain for a prolonged period of time, the adjacent segments of the spinal cord, they also get stimulated, and that is why patient complains of wider pain area than the actual area of the disease. For example, as a patient with CA pancreas, mostly he will have pain in the segments of T10 and T11 dermatome, but they often complain of pain in whole of the upper back. And this is because of the inadequate control of pain. And this is the significance that inadequate control of pain leads to worsening, not only the worsening of the pain, but increasing extent of the pain. So early treatment prevents central sensitization and gives good relief. These are all I talked about the ascending pathways, the three relay stations which I talked about. Now, what happens when it goes into the brain? What happens? Again, the impulses are transmitted back to the affected tissue. So there are descending inhibitory pathways. These inhibitory neurons present in the dorsal horn cells which block transmission of the pain impulses. This is the major endogenous mechanism of inhibition. These neurons are stimulated by descending pathways from brain and thalamus, and this helps to modulate the degree of transmission at different levels of the pain pathway, and this is the final pain perception is a balance of these inputs. The neurotransmitters involved in the descending pathway are serotonin and noradrenaline, and this is the basis of pain relief using tricyclic antidepressants, that is used for generally neuropathic pain. And there are certain connections within the brain. So pain impulses are transmitted to the thalamus, they relate to the several areas of cerebral cortex, and they are processed in different parts of the brain. Maybe for example, the sensory areas of parietal lobe are responsible for localization and interpretation of the pain. The temporal lobe is for the pain memory. The frontal lobe, where cognitive function assesses the significance of pain, emotional response to it, and leads to the pain behavior, which differs from person to person. Or the limbic system, which is involved in both the emotional and the autonomic responses. The temporal lobe, which is responsible for the pain memory. So once we have understood I hope I am clear. I hope I am clear. What is pain? Pain is something which hurts. The simplest we can remember. What is the pathophysiology? That is, if we have to understand the pathophysiology, we have to understand there are nociceptors or receptors which carry pain impulses, and there are three relay stations from peripheral nervous system to spinal cord to the central nervous system, that is the cortex of the brain. And once we have understood the pathophysiology behind pain, now we have to understand what are the types of pain and how we can assess the pain. This is how we'll move forward. So there are different types of pain. So pain is acute pain and a chronic pain. What is acute pain? It is it is a protective kind of pain. It is a necessary pain, short lasting, and what is this important? It causes attention to the injury or illness, and it has certain accompanying features like pupillary dilatation, sweating, or increase in the blood pressure, tachypnea or tachycardia gives an indication that you are having an acute pain and it needs to be addressed. And what is the chronic pain or a cancer pain? Chronic pain is persistent, unremitting, detrimental, useless pain lasting for more than 3 to 6 months. It keeps on waxing and waning. Sometimes it is very severe, sometimes it is mild, and it is mostly irritating kind. It does not let you do your normal work, and it causes sleep disturbances. It is causing lack of appetite. Patient does not find any pleasure in life, and this kind of pain, chronic or cancer pain, needs to be addressed. So, as I talked earlier, there are two types of pain. One is the nociceptive pain, that is because of the stimulation of the free nerve endings, and the other one is the neuropathic pain, which is either due to the injury or due to the compression of the nervous tissue. So, nociceptive pain can be further divided into somatic and visceral pain. Somatic as would be bony pain or the soft tissue pain, and the visceral as in the case of capsular pain because of the stretching of the liver capsule, bowel spasmodic and colicky pain, or pain ischemic pain as in the cardiac tissue. So this is what is nociceptive pain. Now talking about the neuropathic pain, it can be either due to the nerve compression or nerve injury. It is mostly very difficult to understand and manage, but what happens in neuropathic pain? It can be either due to compression or due to injury. So when there is a peripheral nerve injury, as in the example of brachial plexus involvement in case of patient suffering from CA breast, in case of patient having a huge supraclavicular lymph nodal mass and axillary mass, and the brachial plexus is compressed, and patient uh, complains of irritating pain in his arms and shoulders, or the central pain, that is after stroke or some thalamic tumor, or there can be sympathetic nerves. This is relatively uncommon pain. It can be a complex regional pain syndrome, and the essential feature of this pain are often burning and sensory disorder related to vascular distribution. Vascular distribution. And there are two very important features of neuropathic pain. One is called as hyperalgesia, that is an increased response to normally painful stimulus. For example, even if you touch a person or his body from you as if there's been an electric shock in the body, or it can be a allodynia, a painful response to a stimulus like light touch that does not normally cause pain. And patient may even withdraw while we attempt to examine for fear of precipitating pain. So just to recap, nociceptive pain is somatic and visceral type, and neuropathic pain, which is either peripheral or central due to injury or compression of central or peripheral nervous tissue. Somatic pain arises from the bony musculoskeletal pain or the soft tissue. It is generally achy, dull, throbbing, and it is localized kind of pain, as in case of fracture or post-operative infection. And the nociceptive pain is visceral pain is when generally squeezing, cramping kind of pain, and can be very difficult to localize. It often has a referred pain to distant sites, for example, pancreatitis. And in case of neuropathic pain, it is mostly shooting, burning, tingling, and it can follow the nerve pathway, or it can be poorly diffused pain, as in case of phantom limb pain. So how do we assess the pain, and what is the purpose of assessment of the pain? we need to understand that we need to assess the pain to make a diagnosis. Diagnosis in terms of whether it is a visceral pain or it is a whether it is a neuropathic pain or whether it is a nociceptive pain. Because once we are able to identify whether it is a nociceptive pain or a neuropathic pain, accordingly medicines can be prescribed. But in cancer, most of the time we see mixed type of pain. And then we also need to identify the treatable cause. Pain could be not only because of the fracture, not only because of the cancer, it could also because of constipation. So we need to identify a treatable cause. If patient is having pain due to constipation, we will give laxatives and patient will be relieved. If patient is having abdominal pain because of the ascitic fluid, tensed ascitic fluid, you do ascitic fluid tapping and patient will be relieved of the pain. So we need to diagnose the pain. We need to identify a treatable cause of the pain. And we also need to identify the type of the pain. And we need to also understand the pain mechanism. All this helps us to guide the choice of treatment. What treatment is best for what type of pain patient is suffering, and also to assess the effect of treatment. Supposing we gave some treatment and to monitor the progress. So the next question is, do we have any tool to identify such pain? And do we really need to learn those tools? Yes, we have multiple tools and we have to familiarize ourselves from such tools. And what information do we need? First of all, we need to assess and we need to acknowledge. We need to ask the patient, do you have any pain? If the patient says, yes, patient is having pain, then even if you think by his body language or by his attitude that he is not suffering from pain, you have to acknowledge that the patient is having pain. This is very, very important to bridge the barrier of between a physician and a patient so that we can assess what pain is all about. So how do we do the pain assessment? What are the things which we need to know when we are doing assessing a pain of the patient? We need to know when did it start, how did it start, and how long it has been. Is it getting better or worse? And what is the site of pain? And does it radiate to any other place? And very important thing is to make a body chart which shows the sites of the pain, which is very, very helpful. I do it in my practice every day. So whenever you see a patient in your OPD who comes with pain, a body chart can be very, very handy because a patient might have multiple pain at multiple sites and the causes can be also different. For example, let's make a guess what all could be the different sites of making pain in this case. So every pain needs a separate assessment and assignment because this pain site at A could be due to a pathological fracture and pain at the back could be due to a pressure sore. Pain in the lower abdomen could be due to constipation, or pain at the wrist side could be due to inflammation from the IV side. So whenever we are making a body chart, we are ensuring we are making a geographical identification where the patient is having pain. We are trying to identify the location of the pain and at the same time trying to understand what could be the probable cause of pain. And then there are certain descriptors of pain, like wound-like or gripping pain, aching, pulling, like a knife cutting, like a needle poking, or burning sensation, like ants on feeling of ants riding on my body, tight pressure like cramp or tightening pain. So these are the different descriptors which we need to understand so that we can identify patient is suffering from what kind of pain. And for assessment, it is important to understand its onset, its duration, how long it has been, is it what makes you feel better, what makes it worse, or it is continuous all the time, what is the site, does it radiate anywhere, how bad it is important to understand. And to measure this pain intensity or severity, it is very important to use pain scores. What are these pain scores? It can be either visual or verbal, or it can be categoric or verbal, or it can be non-verbal. So visual analog scale, just make a simple line, imaginary from 0 to 10, and just mark where you think the patient says how much pain he has, and accordingly you assess how severe the pain is. The next one is numerical analog scale, which I find very helpful in my daily practice. It is 0 to 10. 0 means no pain and 10 means worst pain you can imagine. Worst pain. So you are basically categorizing pain whether patient is having mild pain, moderate pain or severe pain. That is the severity of the pain. And this is the non-verbal scale for small kids who cannot speak, who cannot understand. For that, you can use Wong-Baker Faces scale. This is also very helpful, and this is also helpful for patients who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's disease. It is not only for the kids; it has other practical applications also. So these are the various scales. And so when talking about the numerical analog scale, up to 3 it is mild pain, 1 to 3 is mild pain, 4, 5, 6 is moderate pain, 7, 8, 9, 10 is severe pain. So we can use whatever suits you better, you can use, but one has to learn to use such tools in day-to-day practice to understand the severity of the pain so that accordingly the drugs can be prescribed. For example, 2 is mild, 5 is moderate, 8 is severe pain, and this is a face, legs, activity, cry, consolability, that is FLACC behavioral pain scale for small kids 2 months to 7 years and who are unable to communicate about their pain. And is scored on a range of 0 to 10, where 0 is representing no pain, right? So these are how you see about the activity of the legs, activity, whether he is crying, consolability, all this you score, and then you come to a conclusion of how severe the pain is. And we all know the 4 vital signs like temperature, pulse rate, blood pressure, and respiratory rate. Similarly, pain score is also supposed to be the 5th vital sign. So it can also be healthcare professionals or nurses or doctors. They can be trained to monitor pain score every time whenever you are taking the vitals of the patient. So evaluating a pain pattern, as I discussed earlier, we have to understand whether pain is present all the time, does it come and go, what is the intensity, whether it is intermittent or spontaneously, is there an incident? For example, if the patient is going, patient gets up to use washroom, and at that time he starts having pain. When he is lying down, he is fine. What incidents exacerbate? For example, during wound dressing, patient can have severe pain. And what is the different pain intensities? So once we have assessed whether his pain is the exacerbating factors, the relieving factors, the medication, it is also very important to see what medications he has been trying to reduce his pain. Because he is not coming to you, you are not the first treating doctor. He has seen several doctors, many have prescribed multiple drugs. So it is very important to review the medications before prescribing any other medication. Is it disturbing your sleep? How does it make you feel? What is the mood? Like you're feeling depressed or you're irritable all the time? And what do you think the pain is all about? All this is very important to assess. So this is a exhaustive pain checklist. This will not let you miss any kind of history in taking the pain in history. But that kind of exhaustive to some people. There are several mnemonics which help in quicker assessment of the pain. For example, PQRST is very commonly used. That is, in one go, you take what are the palliative factors, what makes it better, what makes it worse, the quality, what exactly it is like, and does it variate anywhere, or the severity of the pain, how much does it affect your life, is there all the time, or does it come and go? So these are all different questionnaires Similarly, Old Heart and the Caldera, Socrates, these are all mnemonics to remember. Whatever suits you, it is better to learn one and assess the pain properly before prescribing any medicine. And at the same time, I would like to say that assessment of total pain is incomplete without inquiring the non-physical factors. That is talking about the psychological factors, the social issues related to him, the cultural, the spiritual issues, exploring patients' anxieties and misconceptions, and allowing ventilation of the feelings. So many times when the patient comes crying in your OPD, and when you just listen to him, you think that the pain score of 10 by 10, and you talk to him 5 minutes, the pain score drops to 6 by 10. So it is very important to inquire the non-physical factors while assessing the total pain. So once you assess the pain, there is a WHO analgesic ladder that is given by World Health Organization. It is very important ladder, which there are only 3 simple steps, and this medicines, these are prescribed only depending on the intensity of pain, irrespective of the cause of pain. So it is very easy to use, and it takes care of 80% of the pain. So what is it all about? So in the first step, if the patient is having mild pain, then non-opioid drugs like simple NSAIDs are enough to treat the patient suffering from mild pain. If the patient is suffering from moderate pain, then you have to use NSAIDs along with weak opioids like tramadol or codeine. If the patient is having severe pain, then you have to use strong opioids along with NSAIDs, strong opioids like morphine, which we commonly use, along with the psychosocial and spiritual support. And there is another new adaptation to the ladder, that is step 4, which has been introduced, and that is nerve block or epidurals. Nerve block, as in case of CA pancreas pain, which we commonly do, celiac plexus block. So that is the 4th step. And what is important to see, that understand from this step, that it is bidirectional use. Like if the patient is having severe pain, then you don't have to start from step 1. You can straight away go to step 3. And we also have to remember that in children there is no step 2. That means there is no role of weak opioids like tramadol, which is commonly used. It does not have any role in case of pediatric patients. So it is bidirectional. So once the patient intensity has come down, you can always switch to step 1. Hmm. So this one is a real example who came in my OPD just like this, with his head on the stool. He came with severe pain in my OPD. I assessed his pain. I took a detailed history. To me, he was not looking like a banker. To my surprise, he turned out to be a bank officer. Basically, he was having oral cavity cancer, and he, being a bank officer, he had all the facilities. He had visited most of the corporate hospitals of Mumbai and Delhi, and he had multitude of drugs, starting from paracetamol to tramadol to morphine to immediate release to sustained release and whatnot. And still his pain was inadequately controlled. So I took a detailed history. We gave medications. It took 2 to 3 days time when he came straight walking into our OPD with a smile. So it was very satisfying. So that's the beauty of understanding what pain is, how we can manage, and how things can move ahead. And there are of course non-pharmacological therapies like the therapy, psychotherapy. There are certain support groups, aromatherapy, therapeutic touch, or things like those. But in conclusion, I will say that it is very important to treat total pain, because relief of pain improves quality of life. In the sense that it is controlled, then they will come asking you what next can be done, how long can we live, can I marry my daughter? There are certain things they will keep asking, but in severe pain, you cannot listen to all those stories. And then it is very, very important to assess the pain. And WHO guideline helps in taking care of the 90% of the pain. So it is very important to have good knowledge of pain pathways, mechanisms, and types of pain through assessment of the patient, which are the keys to effective pain management. The WHO guidelines says more than 90% of the patients, and freedom from pain is a human right. Thank you so much. So here I end my slides. So I'll stop sharing.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Sridevi, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rita. We can take up a few questions on pain
Sure.
after today's session. So although Dr. Rita said it multiple times about the importance of proper pain assessment, I would like to re-emphasize that, because many a times we hear about inadequate pain relief. And when you ask in detail about, okay, what kind of pain it was, how severe it was, then no one has any clue. Just the word pain doesn't make any meaning or any sense when you're planning for proper pain management. As she said, we need to understand the site, the quality, the impact of pain on someone's life, the aggravating factors. These are all very, very important, and the pain score is a very valid documentation, because suppose I'm seeing the patient today and I might have marked 9 out of 10. Tomorrow, my colleague will come and see the pain score. And if I have not written that 9 by 10, he would not understand. Severe means severe pain has many meanings to, like, I don't understand exactly at what pain the patient was. And even if I start a medication, then on the next visit, I will have to assess the pain again. Then only I'll understand whether the medication that I have given has actually give some pain relief, or do I need to increase the dose? Do I need to switch to some other medication? So pain assessment on every visit is very, very important for giving better pain relief. And one more important point is to remember about the possibilities of central sensitization of pain. It's not rare that I think almost at least one patient a week or two patients a week we get is from head to toe pain. And they say no one believes them when they say head to toe pain. Your cancer is in your stomach, or your cancer is on your bone, on your thigh. How can you probably have a head to toe pain? So it is a possibility to have head to toe pain or a generalized pain sensation because of the uncontrolled pain. If the stimulus is constant, the adjacent nociceptors, the adjacent spinal segments, and the adjacent segments in the brain get sensitized, and it is like a tightening of a spring. So unless and until you break that cycle, patient will continue to be in a severe generalized pain. So it's very important to believe the patient, and very important to understand the concept of sensitization happens when we don't treat pain properly in the initial stage. I think Dr. Rita has mentioned it really well, the reasons for sensitization. But we, on a practical side, we do see these kind of patients very, very often. It might have started with a simple pain over the chest. Then within a week, it might have the whole chest pain. Then after 2 weeks, then they come up with whole body pain. And many, many suicide or killing requests. Please kill me because I can't bear the pain. And as Dr. Rita was mentioning in the last slide, they come back with a smile, you very, very commonly, because the pain is making them think like, I can't bear this pain and I want to die very often. And a good pain management usually brings them back to normal life. So we can take up a few questions before the case presentation. Are there any questions regarding the pain assessment part, or the types of pain, or the pathways? You can either unmute or you can type it in the chat. Yes, Dr. Sanjana.
Hi. So I wanted to ask about the central sensitization. So once if the patient is already having this central sensitization, then how would it work for them? I mean, already if the patient is not taking, this, madam told that if we are not starting adequate pain relief in the beginning, so once the sensitization has already occurred, how can we progress from that situation? The management, I meant.
Dr. Rita?
Yeah, yeah, very good question. So in the pathophysiology, I clearly said that there are three relay stations. Okay, so what Dr. Sanjana is talking, she's talking about the second relay station, right? The spinal tract one, right? Central sensitization where it occurs. Okay, so central sensitization is, of course, a severe kind of, moderate to severe kind of pain. We have to understand that also. So that is what I showed, that once there are central sensitization, the sleep receptors, they get sensitized, and that is the basis of giving opioids. So if we start giving opioids, that central sensitization component of the pain can also be taken care of. Okay, and in the same slide, I also showed that if the pain is not adequately controlled, then it can spread, or the severity can also spread. Then we have to add more drugs. This is all kind of neuropathic pain, like N-methyl D-aspartate receptors, which sensitize the dorsal horn cells to glutamate and neurotransmitters. And then we have to use ketamine for the refractory pain. So the purpose of identifying pain, acknowledging that okay, the patient is having pain, is to just control the pain at the earliest, so it doesn't go into very severe pain. As I said, that 80 to 90% of the pains can be managed very well using just three simple WHO step ladder. That so our purpose is not to prolong the patient to have more of central sensitization. Start medication early so that the patient has a comfortable life and patient can live better. But the basis for giving drug opioid is the central sensitization of the pain, right? Is it clear?
Hello, madam.
Yeah,
So I don't know whether this is appropriate. Regarding chronic pain,
yeah.
actually this is about a patient. He's a 28-year-old man with no comorbidities who is having chronic back pain for a long time, more than 1.5 years, 1.5 to 2 years. So we actually evaluated, and there was no significant biologic like reason to find he was having this pain when he is prolonged sitting. When he sits for a prolonged amount of time, like for 1 hour, 2 hours, he's getting this pain. So he had gone and saw many doctors, took many treatments. uh, Even they did some not nerve block, they intra-articular injections they took and everything, but his pain is still, he's having the same pain, which is exacerbated when he's sitting, and he's not able to do his he's not able to go to job, and is severely depressed. So I think this uh, that could be a case of central sensitization, right? About
Yes. Yes, very true. That could be a case of central sensitization, and that patient has multiple components, not only the physical. It is the psychological. Patient is depressed. He is having anxiety. So some antidepressant can also be given to take care. Some distraction therapy, physiotherapy can also be tried since he's having a long chronic pain for 1.5 years. So alternative therapies can also be tried. See, neuropathic pain is very difficult to treat. It cannot be treated in one go. You have to keep trying the drugs. This suits him best. And you also have to explore his social and other spiritual issues for coming to a final conclusion, or taking an adequate, giving an adequate prescription for pain such of the patient. I truly acknowledge that such patients are difficult to treat, but nevertheless, you have to keep trying so that patient can get optimum pain control.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rita. There are a few questions in the chat about which is the best scale for neuropathic and cancer pain. And connected to that, there is another question. Is the visual analog scale can cover all the aspects of pain?
Okay, the visual analog scale. What was the first question?
So the first
As to
question
what
is,
pain
what is the
scale
best?
morphine should be started, right?
No.
First
The
is
first
what
question
pain.
is which pain scale should be used for assessment of neuropathic and cancer pain?
Okay. For the neuropathic pain or the cancer pain, the pain scale which I showed you, which I am regularly using, which is very practical, is the numerical analog scale. In everyday practice, I am using it, and that is the most practical and easiest to imply. And as far as because as you also talked that you see the patient, you score it, and 2 days back, 3 days back, when you ask the patient to get back to assess the need for more medication or to titrate the doses of morphine or any other medicine, or do we need to add some adjuvants? Adjuvants are drugs which are not painkillers by themselves, but they help to reduce the pain. So in that case, you need to have a numerical analog scale noted down so that you can assess the severity of the pain. Patient comes with a score of 9 by 10 and with medication comes to a score of 3 by 10 is a adequate good pain control over 3 to 4 days. So I find it that very practical, and other ones I have already shown, which I generally use the body chart which I showed, that helps you to kind of localize the site of pain, and the checklist which I showed, the exhaustive one, which I generally use. But there are multiple in the literature, whatever suits you. But the bottom line is that you should be able to assess the pain adequately. As I also showed in the patient who was well educated, well versed, had all the medicine, still it was not well communicated. Communication is also very, very important. Empowering the patient, empowering the caregivers about the status of the disease, the nature of the pain, why are you giving that painkiller. It is all very, very important to have an optimum control of the pain. The question is, at what scale do you start morphine? Morphine can be started for moderate to severe pain. Generally, for moderate pain, tramadol is enough. 400 milligram of tramadol is the maximum dose which you can give, and that equates to 30 milligram of morphine. And compared to tramadol, morphine is very cheap. So, taking that into account, you can start morphine even for a moderate to severe pain. Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rita. Is there any other questions that we have not answered? So there is a question on pain assessment tools in persons who cannot articulate or even move in cognitive impairment. So how will you assess the pain? Ma'am, are you there?
Hello. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So that is what I showed now. That is the Wong-Baker Faces Pain Rating Scale, on which you can, from the facial expression, make out what is the score of the pain. That is what I had showed in my presentation also, right? So there are multiple tools for patients who cannot speak or who cannot communicate. From their facial expressions you can make out, and the most commonly which is used is Wong-Baker Faces Pain Rating Scale.
And if they're cognitively impaired, as Dr. Rita was mentioning, we can make it out from the facial expression. Usually there will be wrinkles on the forehead. They'll be keeping their closed eyes like really tight, a little bit of mourning. When you try to change the position, then we can understand that the way they react, their facial expression suddenly changes. So that is how we used to do that in patients who are unconscious. even in unconscious pain patients, we do get a lot of pain experience. So that is how we assess, especially looking at the facial expression and the distress that they express when you try to do pain. Yes, Dr. Atri, you have some question?
Good evening, ma'am.
We can't hear you. It's no, it's I think the network, we can't hear. It's broken. We can't hear it. Can you just type if you can't? Well, I'll just read the last question, which is scale. Most of the elderly come with compression fracture, osteoporosis, neuropathic pain. When we start medicine, initial drowsiness scares them, and drowsiness at times cause fall. How do we counsel before medication? Dr. Rita, would you like to answer that?
Yeah,
The balance
yeah,
drowsiness and the
right. So I assume for two things. This drowsiness, if you have started morphine, are you talking of that? So that is a different thing. And if the patient has come in a drowsy state, there are two different situations, right? Also, in this case, I assume it is elderly patient who has come with a fracture, osteoporosis, and he is in a drowsy state. So in that case, you have to first admit the patient, take a pain history, take everything into account, get certain investigations done. The cause of drowsiness has to be ruled out, and then only you can start the medicine. The other scene is when you start morphine, there are patients who feel drowsy. For that, you counsel before giving the medication, right? The first day when you write medicine, you are telling all the side effects of morphine, opioids, including its side effects. And what do we generally say? Patient might feel nauseated or vomiting, which will be over by 3 to 5 days. The drowsiness will be also over by three to 4 days, and my patient will have constipation, which laxatives has to be taken regularly. So this is how opioid related drowsiness you can counsel the patient. And if patient has come in a drowsy state, then definitely you have to admit the patient, identify the cause, and then only start the drug.
thank you so much, Rita. Sri Priya, do you have that TED Talk video on pain readily available, or can we just
Pardon me, ma'am, I didn't get.
Smriti's video on
Total pain.
pain? Yes.
Yes, we have.
Can we
Sure.
just quickly have a look at it just before the case presentation?
Sure.
So we'll
Sure.
play a short video on one of our colleagues, Smriti Rana. She's explaining her experience in a TED Talk. So just a short video. I'm sorry, I didn't give Sri Priya advance notice that I'm going to ask for it. So, and people who have asked about the management part, will come
this
to that.
notion of total pain, pain that takes into account the life circumstances of the patient that contribute to his or her experience of suffering. I came across that concept quite early in my life, and I mean, in my career, and I thought I understood it, theoretically at least. And then one day, the home care team that I was a part of was called in to see this fisherman in one of the outlying villages of Trivandrum. We parked our van some 400 meters away, made our way down this narrow, undulating path. We could hear this man's screams well before we got to his house. And on approaching the house, we were assaulted by this stench, which made me gag. And when we entered his home, we were met by this helpless young woman, and behind her on the bed, a man in his 40s, who was the source of the screams. he had a myriad problems and a feeding tube. And on closer examination, we found that he also had a bowel obstruction that was not allowing him to pass what his wife was so diligently feeding him because she didn't know what else to do to look after him. And as a result, he was regurgitating his own waste. It was awful. Anyway, he was cleaned up, analgesics and other medication were administered, but no matter what we did, his pain would not fall below 6 on the pain scale, which is essentially a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, where we ask people to score their subjective pain. So finally, this benevolent and wise doctor that I have the absolute privilege of calling my mentor, he took this man's hand in his own and he asked him, he said, "What's your biggest concern right now? What is bothering you?" What an odd question, I thought. I mean, the pain, the humiliation, the despair, and just the misery of everything that he was experiencing. I mean, the answer was glaringly obvious to me. The man didn't say anything for a long time, and I started to get fidgety. The silence was starting to get awkward and strained, to me at least. But the good doctor, he held steadfast. And after about 6 long minutes, and I know this because I was timing it, this man very softly said, "All I wanted was for my children not to be fishermen. And now they're going to be just that." He knew he was dying, and he knew that his wife would not be able to support the children on her own, and this one fact was causing him far more agony than anything else that he was going through. So one of the things we strive to do in our program is to undertake the educational needs of children from disease-ravaged families that can no longer afford to send them to school. But this process takes about a week from when the child has been identified. In this case, however, we sped up the processes. Donors were found, pledges were made, documents were signed, all to see these 2 children, aged 8 and 10, through to college. We returned to the fisherman's house the next morning, and he was asked what his pain was. Still 6, he said. He was then shown the documents, and he was told, "It is done. Your children will not be fishermen." The transformation on that man's face was magical. And once he had digested that information, he was very gently asked one more time, "What is your pain now?" 1. He died 3 days later, pain-free. And that, my friends, is total pain. And that was when I truly learned my first lesson in being still and allowing.
Thank you, Sri Priya. So in this, Smriti has summarized what we have been talking for about, and there were questions about, is the VAS scale enough to cover all the aspects of pain? So that single question will usually cover. I'm sure Dr. Rita will also be asking that question every day. What is bothering you the most? It may not be the physical pain. It may be many other aspects of pain that is coming out with that single question. That is one important assessment question in pain management. I think it's time for the case presentation. Sri Priya, I think Dr. Deepak is in train, so he's there, but he cannot present because of the network issue. So I'll present from our side. So this case is from Dr. Deepak. So he has sent it yesterday. Yeah, next slide. So this is about a 50-year-old male with adenocarcinoma of head and neck of pancreas with metastasis to spine and iliac crest. So the presenting complaints were 4 days of constipation, severe pain over the spine and hip region, respiratory distress from 6th day, gangrene of the left distal foot from 9th day. So he was apparently well 5 years back. Complaints of pain in lower back 5 years ago with anorexia and gradual weight loss. Was seen in many hospitals and had started with walking with stooping forward. Biopsy was taken and the diagnosis was confirmed. Patient was referred to their institute for pain management. He had disturbed sleeping pattern and decreased oral intake. Conscious and oriented, temperature is 100, pulse is 134 beats per minute, respiration 32 per minute, and BP 146/96. So these are the significant investigation. I'm not going to read through everything, but we can see that the HPU has been falling from 9.4 to 8.5, and the total count is also showing some increase from December to end of December, and albumin is decreasing. Sodium is also decreasing from 137 to 132 along with potassium. The next slide. The patient was started on morphine immediate release tablets with a dosing schedule of 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 6 p.m., and 10 p.m. So this is the routine recommended dose for the morphine administration. We'll come to that during one of our sessions. The next day, pain was assessed from the caregiver and the dose was increased to 20 milligram per dose and 40 milligram at night. After 2 days, the dose was increased to 30 milligram per dose and 60 milligram at night. And the other drugs were gabapentin, amitriptyline, paracetamol, 1 gram, ceftriaxone injection, pantoprazole, calcium, and injection calcium gluconate, and syrup Duflac. Patient had to be given an enema for constipation, and the patient was planned for cord epidural injection, but due to constant soiling of his diapers, the procedure had to be abandoned. Next slide. Due to maximum dose of morphine at 180 milligram for 24 hours, the patient became drowsy and the saturation was dropping, hence morphine was stopped. Again, morphine restarted the next day due to severe pain. The patient was planned for palliative radiotherapy to spine, but could not be sent due to desaturation. So psychosocial aspects, a 50-year-old man, married man living with his wife and 2 minor teenage children. He was a security guard and the breadwinner of his family. Though he was covered under ESI scheme, still financial problems started and mental stress was there. So the main concerns are pain and financial problems. A 50-year-old man with adenocarcinoma of head and neck of pancreas with metastasis to spine and iliac crest and severe pain in spine and hip region. So the discussion points that Dr. Deepak has put forward is, what are the pain management options for this patient? Does this patient need palliative care? And what can be the other issues faced by the family? And what all can be done for this patient and his family? Thank you, Dr. Deepak. I know you are there, but I hope you will be able to listen to the discussion points later. So anyone, we can start with the pain management options. Anyone from the participants? Now we have heard a little bit about the pain, the total pain, the types of pain. Anything that you want to ask Dr. Deepak? Are we clear about the type of pain here? Are we clear about all the aspects of pain? Yes, Dr. Subbalakshmi, he needs palliative care. I agree to that. So when this patient, now we have heard about the pain assessment. Would you like to add on something when this kind of patient comes to you? About, let's start with the assessment part, because today's session was mostly on the pain assessment. What would you like to, like, suppose it's a patient coming to you, would you like to add on some more assessment part, some more points to this, so everyone agrees that he needs palliative care? I think from the initial presentation that we sent has this question about whether this patient needs palliative care. So please don't repeat that question, because now we all know that this kind of patient needs palliative care. Yeah, so there are some comments for that we need the pain severity in a pain scale, assessment in some scale. I think Dr. Deepak might have done, but it is not stated in the presentation. And only with the help of the pain scale, we'll be able to. Yes, Dr. Deepak, you want to say something?
Actually,
I'm sorry, you are not audible, sir.
Dr. Deepak, you are muted.
what whenever whenever the patient had like breakthrough pains, we had an option of giving him the bolus dose also. But with the maximum dose reaching up to 180 milligram per day, the patient turned to be started desaturating and a bit drowsy and all. So we had to stop it for 1 day so that he doesn't desaturate with 4 to 6 liters of oxygen also. So, but the pain again reappeared and it was severe in intensity. So we had to restart the morphine again.
Yes, understood.
Actually, we tried to relieve the pain many a times. We planned a OT for a but that was postponed because of like he was given enema and then Dupalac and constant soiling of his diapers, so it would be infective. Infection risk increases, and we planned for a radiotherapy, a palliative radiotherapy to the spine. That also could not happen because the patient was constantly desaturating. So means I also want to know because I like to inform you that the patient expired on 1st of January. I'd like to just inquire from all the senior colleagues and faculties here who are more knowledgeable than me, really. What could have been really an option for pain management on this patient when we tried and we failed in two other options?
Yes, we'll come to that, Dr. Deepak, definitely. Dr. Arpita, you wanted to say something?
Since this man was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, so probably at the time of diagnosis, he must have been definitely told by the treating doctors that his duration will be short-lived. Because we know pancreatic cancer patients live hardly for, I mean, a timeline must have definitely been given. I can say this because my own uncle passed away of the pancreatic cancer, and when he was diagnosed with the pancreatic cancer, he was just given a timeline of 3 months, but he passed away in just 1 month, and he had like two daughters who were aged 5 and 3. So what I'm here to say, the physical pain, the pain due to the disease is definitely there. But in this aspect, the amount of spiritual pain, the pain of leaving the family behind with a very young family behind, the burden of that is humongous, I believe.
A very, very valid point, Arpita, because that thought itself that I'm going to die would increase the pain experience because you are thinking a lot about your family and not being able to provide for the family. So everything adds on to the that. But even otherwise, even Dr. Deepak, I would before giving this to Dr. Rita, I think if this kind of if some of my colleague is asking for opinion, I would have wanted more details of pain, the characteristics, how they explain that particular pain, which all areas are. You might have done that in your documentation, but yeah, that's one for learning for everyone. Whenever you see a patient or you present or you document, you have to go through that PQRST. And in our setting, we have added two more questions, U and V, understanding of pain. What do they understand? What is that they mean by that pain? Sometimes the patients say, the pain means death to me. The pain means that I'm dying. The pain means that I'm still having my illness. I'm still progressing. So those kind of questions and the thorough assessment, writing the pain scores, the quality of pain, the site of pain, the duration of pain, everything that Dr. Rita mentioned. So then we can understand. So there is a question about whether morphine can be given, fentanyl can be given. So those things can be kind of sorted out when you know exact picture of pain. Because we have not seen this patient. You have seen, so you know what it is. But when you tell to another person, it has to be very clear. Dr. Rita, would you like to answer these questions? Along with, there are some questions in the chat.
The pain intensity was severe. It was 8 to 9 at all times. When the morphine reached 180 milligram for a total daily dose, then for a single day before desaturating, when we stopped the morphine, the score was like 5 or 6, not below that. And it was like patient was always in severe breathing pain. He was breathing on his bed, lying on one side because there was severe pain on his hip region and the back region. And at night times, it was really severe. Like he would be howling in pain. and the caregivers will be running and they will be clueless because they had already given him a breakthrough pain dose, extra dose of morphine. So it was really means a horrifying experience when I saw the patient at night, and we had to like because it was COVID protocol and COVID protocols were in place, we could not allow all the patient party to come into the ward and see the patient or console him or anything. So one by one, like morning one patient, his wife, evening daughter. So that was the maximum we could do because it was COVID protocol and we could not allow more patients in the ward. And during his like last days, like 28, 29, he was also not able to recognize properly everyone.
Uh, Dr. Sridevi, is it okay to ask the
Yes,
question to Deepak
sure,
now?
sure, sure. Sure, please.
Dr. Deepak, my Pratva here. Uh, can you please elaborate the family members, your wife and two children, is it?
Wife and two children, both children were teenaged,
Daughters,
13
is it?
and 17.
Daughters.
One son, one daughter. Daughter was elder
Okay.
and son was younger.
Okay. I would like to look at the last part of the question. What all can be done for this patient and his family? Uh, the perceived pain could definitely be more because of the state at which he is leaving his family. It would be better if we start with at the time of diagnosis, when the staging was done. The doctor initially, most of the times, the patients are in denial. You know, when the diagnosis just like that is told to them, they are in a denial. But they take some time and they come around and they come to a certain level of acceptance. When that stage is reached, it's very important that the whole family is brought together and see the inevitable nature of the progression of this particular condition. I think at some point, even the family will come to an acceptance. They also take a certain period of time to understand it. And we can tell what are all the possible uh, milestones in this progress. What are the possible things that we can expect out of this? Many a times, when someone is prepared for what is to come in the coming days, both for the patient as well as for the family, at some point, you know, it is not as bad as how something suddenly, all of a sudden, is thrown on them. They become prepared. Then, what could be the possible support system for this family that one can provide? Many a times, probably in this particular case, the patient per se is going through the pain is one aspect. But if there is a reassurance, if there is some kind of a hope that the wife or the children, the son or the daughter's future in some way, you know, is taken care of, which amounts to basically, you know, counseling, looking for a NGO support, a network, or something like that, you know. I think the way they perceive and the way they accept it and then they go through it becomes largely different, is my understanding. I'm not very technical with the type of painkillers. Yes, assessing whether it is mm, neuropathic pain or the other one, and depending upon that, the type of medication. I think most of the times we can take the help of an anesthetist or a pain management person over the phone and do it. But largely, I feel time should be invested in making the patient and then the family accept the inevitable nature of the problem, and as much as possible to get a support system where the perceived pain also is to a large extent taken care of. And this is also a question to Dr. Sridevi, that will, in this course, do we get to know if there are any organizations, NGOs, which support the family members of cancer patients, so that, you know, those people support can be taken?
Thank you, Uma, for your inputs about the fourth question that Dr. Deepak had. And if anyone wants any details about even the palliative care centers, just log into Pallium India's website and there is a directory. Just click, it just pops up directory. And a state-wise we have given, and we have another session on organizing palliative care services in its. So hopefully we'll be able to cover, but we won't be able to give the details because it's a huge list. but and we have a telehealth team. So if you are in some place and you want to have some support and you want to know whether something is available there, you can either go through the directory or contact our telehealth team. So we'll be able to help you with that, make you collaborations in those areas. Dr. Rita, we would like to hear from you regarding the
Yeah.
patient story.
Yeah, so I have heard all of you, and I quite agree with everyone that you need to assess the pain holistically, first and foremost. So, all the components of pain are present in this patient, and this patient's history also indicates that patient is in his end of life. He needs end of life care more importantly than giving any radiotherapy or anything. Patient is a dying patient that needs to be communicated very very well to the family, to the caregivers. And as the doctor was telling that it was very very difficult to kind of tackle this problem in the night time. It actually happens. It's a day to day practical problem, and we need to communicate well. But sometimes I have seen that in such patients in my practice, patient is agitated and crying, desperate in pain. You can give antipsychotic drug also. Injection haloperidol, 5 milligram and 5 to 10 ml of normal saline over a period of 3 to 5 minutes. It works well for some point of time. Like you have to keep trying what drug will suit best, and at the same time you have to keep communicating with the family members what to expect, what not to expect. There should not be any false reassurance. Like it should be well communicated. That is what is key for the proper pain management. And there are certain social issues which has also be taken care of. Patient needs reassurance. The caregivers also need reassurance, or they need to be empowered what all is happening. Only then the level of pain can be lowered in the case of patient as well as in the case of caregivers who are also suffering from pain of, they are going to lose their loved one. So all this is very, very important.
Thank you, Dr. Rita. There is a question, Dr. Arpita.
Ma'am, this may sound a little selfish. I don't know whether it's right or not to share it in this forum, but I have kind of experienced the same thing as like many of us here on this platform are doctors. And especially dealing with the COVID situation, we are seeing many on an average, ma'am, from ever since the COVID has struck, irrespective of all our different fields, we are all doing COVID duties. Now I'm coming this because like Dr. Deepak says, that when you see a patient, when you're involved in a patient care, and then you lose a patient, it definitely always affects our mental health as well. As doctors also,
Yes.
I don't know, people talk, I don't know whether doctors talk about it or not, but even as doctors, we are also going through a traumatic experience, which is not just once, but twice, thrice, it just comes on in a very repetitive way. So how to deal with that sort of a mental pain, ma'am, which I believe most of our colleagues will probably we don't share, and probably once it is on, like it's like a switch on and a switch off mode. On duty we are so much to take, and when we are going off, probably we just try to shut off that department, to shut off what we have experienced in our workplace, and try to just forget. But I know things don't just go that way. So how to deal with this sort of a mental pain that which we go through, and this is definitely an agonizing one as well.
Thank you, Dr. Arpita. Yes, this is the right platform to share that also. And thank you for sharing that, because as you told, we generally don't talk about it. We do have a session on self-care, but not for this course because that's a longer one. But for many other courses and for the physical training, we do have one good long session on self-care, because when you come to so I think other many specialties are dealing with deaths after COVID. I think Dr. Rita would agree that in palliative care we see very commonly. We have to deal with, because we get to know about their total pain, and then you really get closer to them. And then we deal with multiple deaths per day over years. So we have a mandatory session on self-care, how to take care of yourselves, how to take care of your team members. It's not just you as going down.
Yes,
Your nurses will be distressed, and they'll be coming, they'll be totally upset. They don't know how to talk about it. At least we vocalize it, but nurses don't. So we have
yes,
a whole
ma'am.
course on self-care. Unfortunately, that is not included in this foundation course, but yeah, there are techniques. Maybe today's session I won't be able to talk about it, but yeah, that's a very
But if
important
it
one.
can, it would be really good if it is I mean, covered somewhere, because in palliative care we are also getting involved. I mean, not just in COVID, but if you just minus the COVID, and with, we are dealing with patients, and at some point of level where we are taking care of the patients. It's emotion, it's not physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, uh, and when there is a spiritual and an emotional involvement, there is always to and fro information. So even to, as health caregivers, I think even our mental health is equally important, so that we can do a efficient job when we are doing taking care of these patients.
Dr. Rita, you wanted to say something?
Me?
Yeah, you wanted to say something to
No,
Arpita,
no.
or
It's a very pertinent question, and all of us suffer from this. But with time and with training, you have to learn to cope. You have to develop your own coping mechanism and help others also. As Dr. Sri Devi said, that your nurses, they have no one to, like, they don't even feel like sharing. So you have to allow everyone to talk, ventilate their feelings. And of course, you feel bad when a patient passes, but there are times when you talk with the caregivers, when you talk among yourselves, what went wrong? Did we do right thing? What could have been done? What was in death is inevitable. We all have to understand. So if we talk with each other, we can kind of de-stress and ventilate our feelings, and then everyone has their own coping mechanisms. And being a healthcare professional, time will teach you. I think that every day is saying, like, as Dr. Sri Devi told, that we are seeing cancer patients, we are seeing patients in the palliative care, we are seeing patients every day who are dying, who are suffering from, life limiting illnesses, where nothing can be offered except for supportive and symptomatic treatment. But with COVID, all the streams of doctors are experiencing this, and this can only be, uh, um, you can help yourself by knowing what helps you better, what helps you better to relieve yourself. That is what I think is important.
so in our foundation course in palliative care, we cover all these non-pharmacological things, and kind of we are all trained to take care of ourselves and look after your colleagues. So yeah, if anyone is interested, we'll notify about the next foundation course in palliative care, which is meant for allied health professionals like social workers and psychologists. But in that, they cover a lot about grief, bereavement, self-care, keeping your own mental health. So everything is covered in detail in that. Thank you, Arpita, for sharing
Thank
that,
you,
and a
ma'am.
very, very valid question or sharing. And coming back to Dr. Deepak, I understood that you have not, you wanted management that could have been done for this patient. And I'm sure we have 3 more sessions in pain. So there we will be talking about opioids, especially in this situation, just to mention in one sentence that in our setting, we would have tried methadone, we would have tried steroid. So there are multiple options which we will discuss. I'm sure we'll be discussing in coming 3 sessions. And still, if your question is unanswered, please write to me and we will discuss about it. So these were the things that, and I totally agree that I think the pancreatic pain is the nightmare for me. Because that's a very, very difficult pain to control, and very often we get distressed seeing their pain. So I can understand what Dr. Deepak was trying to tell here. So we'll definitely cover difficult. We have a particular whole session for difficult pain. So I hope your question will be covered, definitely covered by Dr. Mehdi. She's an expert in managing difficult pain. So yeah, so thank you so much, Dr. Deepak, for bringing in the case presentation.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for the interaction, and a very, very special thanks for Dr. Rita for agreeing to come and share your experience, share your expertise with all of us. Thank you so much, all the participants. So see you again on Friday. We'll be starting the pain management part then. Thank you so much, everyone. Over to you, Sri Priya.
Thank you, Dr. Rita, for your valuable time. We do understand your busy schedule and you found out time for this cohort. Thank you so much for joining us. And belated New Year wishes to you from us as well. And thank you everyone for joining this evening class. And as the sessions progress, we do expect that we learn a lot of new things from everyone. Basically, this is a platform for mutual learning. So with that note, this is Sri Priya from the Tips Echo Desk, along with Dr. Rita and Dr. Sridevi signing off for the day. See you in the next session. And please don't forget to leave your feedbacks because it is very valuable for us. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.